This series is made possible by the generous donation of Stifel Financial and viewers like you. Thank you.
Looking at the world today, you may wonder, how do we begin to make sense of things? How can we solve problems when we can't trust the media, our leaders, and even the news? What's real, and how can we talk about it? This is why this series came into being. I'm Eric Thome, and this series, Where Do We Go From Here?, goes to the heart of things. We address local problems that have great impact by seeking local leaders and specialists to give us honest information that provides us with ways to move forward. Past episodes can be found at the Nevada County Digital Media Center website. The program also airs and is streamed on the Government Channel 17 every Monday night at 7 p.m. on that same website. The series today will be addressing the candidates running for the NID Board of Directors. We'll begin to discuss these matters with Ricki, who is both a candidate and not a candidate in a way.
That's correct.
I mean, you're the only person who actually applied for the first district seat on the board.
Right. I am technically the director-elect for Division 1 of the Nevada Irrigation District Board of Directors. The filing period was August 15th, and because no one filed and the incumbent chose to retire, then I'm it.
You're it. You don't have to campaign? You
No,
don't have
but
to raise money?
Well, but it should be said that I campaigned for the last 18 months and raised money the last 18 months because when one is running for office, you have to be prepared that you will perhaps more than likely have an opponent.
Right. Now, the person you're replacing, Nancy Weber, is, I think, legendary in Nevada County. Even people who don't follow NID very well probably know a lot about her. She was on for something like 15 years?
I think it's, 4, 8, 12, 16. It could be 20 years. I'm not sure. And Nancy is a legend. She is a tireless advocate for all of the Nevada Irrigation District and all of Nevada County, and especially her division. She is a remarkable woman. She has graciously been mentoring me for over a year. And I can't say enough wonderful things about Nancy Weber. And
since she essentially wanted you to replace her, I guess that says very good things about you.
Thank you. I think it does. I hope it does. I believe so, yeah. Now I have her faith, for sure.
I remember when Nancy first went on, however many years ago it was, she was considered a bit of a maverick, and at that time NID had a reputation of being an old boys club, essentially, and she was the person who was going to shake it up. And I know she certainly has the personality to do that, and the gumption and the determination. But I don't really know, since I haven't been following NID in those intervening years, what success she actually had.
Well, Nancy has had many, many successes. She has been a champion for getting water lines extended out into these rural neighborhoods, which has the benefit of not only providing treated water, but everywhere there's a treated water line, every 750 to 1,000 feet, there is a fire hydrant. So her program that she really advocated for, and Director Miller was also instrumental in that, to getting the money, working hard to make it affordable. That was a Nancy Weber accomplishment, without question.
So is there anything left for you to do?
Oh my goodness, yes. There is much for me to do. Indeed, there is.
What are some of your main objectives?
Well, you know, NID has suffered, especially in the last several years, they have lost the public trust in many ways. And I also, I'll step back just a minute, if I may, and tell you a bit about my background, and then I can it will make more sense when I go forward. So I've worked for over 30 years in the investment real estate line of work, I guess is the best way to say it. And in the last 12 years, prior to my retirement, I led a group of real estate investment trusts buying and selling properties in the greater southwest of the United States. So we would buy properties, manage them, increase their profitability, sell them, and then make the returns back to essentially retirees, public employee retirees. So I traveled all over the United States. I have a very deep background in real estate, investment, and land use. So when I retired, I came back home. By the way, I've lived here most of 40 years, came back home and thought, what can I do? You know, I'm not just ready to do nothing. I really wanted to engage in this community. Because of the work and the travel demands on me, and by the way, raising 5 kids up here, I was not able to engage in the community in any way. So after my retirement, I thought, I really want to engage in a way that is meaningful to me and where my skills can be used to help my community in some way. And I wasn't certain about where that would be. So I would talk to some friends, and people said, why don't you check out NID? And I did. Well, what I discovered when I got to NID was, I think my skills will be a real asset. They don't have, and have not had for some time, and I don't know the full board history, any business person with a business background on that board. They've had farmers and teachers and doctors and lawyers and all sorts of folks, but they have not really had a business person. So it became clear to me that my background would be really, really helpful. And that is why I decided to run. I've been attending the NID meetings for over 18 months. I think I've only missed 3. And I have really been able to get a good grasp on what NID does, what else is needed, how it can be better, and how I can engage in it. And I'm excited to do that. So with that, can you go back to your question?
Well, if you've got a
it puts it in context, I think.
Yeah, we will get back to that question in a minute, but I would just turn a little bit in another direction and say that with all that time you've spent, you probably understand NID much better than almost anybody outsider in the county, because one of the problems is that in spite of the efforts of people like Nancy, NID has remained, I don't want to quite say opaque, but I guess not very transparent.
That's correct.
And it was only last spring that they finally started having their public meetings televised. Or
That's
not,
correct.
I believe they're not even going out live yet, are they?
They are now going out live.
For a while
so they have live streaming and of course then the video audio. And by the way, that was another thing that Nancy pushed very, very hard for. And God bless her, she carried the water there for that for getting that done in our community.
No, even last spring they were resisting.
There was a lot of resistance.
It just wasn't worth the money.
Well, it wasn't.
Well,
I believe there were other reasons.
Yes.
Yes.
So you'll be entering into a group of people who are not used to having the public looking directly over their shoulders. Are you going to be comfortable?
I'll be totally comfortable. I'm currently a member of the Nevada County Planning Commission in addition to running for, or now being the director-elect. So I'm really quite used to engaging with the public on a commission or board level. I will be fine. And I embrace it because fundamentally, I believe the folks in our community must know where their water comes from, why it's so important, and why they must engage in the policies that are being made about their water.
Now it happens that this particular election is going to greatly change the majority.
It could.
3 of the 5 seats are up for election. Yours is already settled.
Yes.
But District 2, which is a little farther east, the Chicago Park area, is up, and then the district that runs in Placer County.
Right.
And do you have any idea how the election may change things?
Well, if the runners against the incumbents win, there will be a dramatic change in policy, I believe. And I think you would see it most in transparency, public participation, and one of my key issues is financial and fiscal responsibility and how to set those priorities of what you spend and how you spend it and when will be shifted, I believe, if in fact there is that change on the board.
So, and if there isn't, you'll still fight in those directions.
I will, because I believe that spending the taxpayers' money in a thoughtful, careful manner is the correct way to go about it. And I also believe I have the skills to build consensus. And hopefully I can gain the respect of my fellow board members and get some consensus and move forward in some interesting and positive directions.
Now, there's so many directions we could go into, but I think I'll jump to the most controversial one.
Okay.
And that's partly because it relates to this whole question of transparency. The board did a horrible job of preparing the ground for the proposed Centennial Dam and started buying up properties before they had any public support at all. And the first press releases, I guess you'd say, about justifying the dam last spring were very, very weak.
Yes.
I finally got actually on this program, which Lou Sitzer put together. He did a series of, I think it was eight or nine programs last spring. And I finally got some pretty good arguments from members of NID, the manager and some board member, one board member at least, Nick Wilcox, that made it sound like it might be a worthwhile project. It didn't completely convince me, and I don't think it's convinced many other people. But the big question was, why were they out there buying up property before they had any consensus, before they had an approval, before they even had a final budget, before they'd gone to Federal Energy Regulatory Commission or many of the other hoops they had to go through? We also were told last spring that two of the documents that were needed to proceed, the environmental impact report and the raw water master plan would be ready this fall, and now turns out they're at least 2 years away.
Correct.
So all of this makes it seem like a somewhat shady operation.
Well, I don't know about it being shady or not shady. What I can tell you is I've been a real strong voice for them to stop buying property in the Bear River Canyon. And I've written several op-eds, letters to the newspaper. I have given public testimony at nearly every NID meeting when they are looking at buying those properties. I feel like, well, I won't say I feel. I know that it is an improper use of public funds. They have the way that they can justify it legally, okay. But I believe it is an improper use of public funds to buy people's homes in the Bear River Canyon. What they have done by those actions is break the real estate market in that canyon. And that, for me, as a real estate investment person, is, tantamount to a crime. Not that it's a real crime. I please everybody. I'm not saying they've committed a crime. I'm just saying that it is very poor judgment on from my perspective. And I have had the opportunity to talk to a number of the homeowners whose homes they have purchased and whose lands they have purchased. They describe a very negative, very traumatic process. NID's general manager and one or more of the board members say, oh, we only buy things from people who come to us. I have had an opposite experience. So I could go into more why it breaks the real estate market there if you want, but it really devalues the real estate that's there. And so if you had a $600,000 home and you wanted to retire and downsize, there's only one buyer for your home. And it eliminates all the market influences and the market ability for your home if you want to sell it to the open market. There are no open market buyers. So that's not a good thing.
And it also, from what I've heard, will destroy one of the best recreation areas around.
Well, that's the dam. I'm only talking right now about the property buying and the use of public funds to do so, way ahead of the environmental work, the permits, anything. And if you take a step back and say, well, I'm 100% for the dam, I think it's okay. All right. If you look at it from just a strictly just straight up business thing, they are buying these properties at the height of the real estate market.
Right.
Everybody knows real estate goes up and down, and we are now beginning, all the experts agree, that we are headed into a correction no one thinks it's going to be like 2008, but we are headed to a correction. So that your house that they may have paid you $600,000 for is probably going to be worth $500,000 on the open market. So here we have an expenditure of public money at a higher amount than they could have gotten had they waited until after they got the permits when the market had leveled out. So it's not even a good timing business decision, in my view.
Now they've stepped back and they've now said they're going to wait at least 2 years for the EIR and
do the raw water master plan. Right.
Are they still buying properties, or have they stopped?
They are. I have asked. Some community groups have asked very specifically, please stop. And their position is they will not stop. Their position is if someone comes to us and they want to sell, we're buyers. There you go. So we disagree.
You disagree.
Yeah.
Now, as you say, that if it changes, if the election goes a certain direction, there will be some major changes in policy.
Mm-hmm.
What if it doesn't?
Well, if it doesn't, it doesn't. And then we all work together to make it be the best we can possibly make it be, you know. Hopefully, if they want to continue to buy properties, I can convince them with market data that this is probably not the best time to continue to do that. And they should wait until they get some permits and some things that say that they can go forward. I think I'm making some inroads with a few of those board members as I discuss that, you know, from just a strictly financial investment perspective and not an environmental or any of those kind of concerns, although those are very valid and present as well. But to answer your question, if the board changes, I think the policy will change. If the board does not change, I'm hoping that I can at least make some inroads.
Now, when I first heard that the dam was proposed, I had a sort of almost knee-jerk Nevada County person saying, we don't need dams anymore. That's so 20th century, and we've moved beyond that. And as I said, I thought their first arguments when they put op-eds in the Union and so on were very, very weak. Last spring on these programs that Lou Sitzer put together, I did hear some better arguments from Rem Swearingen and from Nick Wilcox, basically using climate change as a justification, that because there will be more rain and less snow in the future, we can't count on the snowpack to be our water reservoir, so we have to have more artificial reservoirs. This struck me as the first good argument I had seen. But then I've seen so many sets of statistics going both ways of arguing how much excess water is there going to be, and very little attention being paid to alternative ways of storing water.
Right.
Do you know of any good alternatives?
Well, I know of, okay, I'm not a water person, all right, I'm a business person.
You're about to be a water person.
I will rely heavily on staff and all the very incredible smart people who are in this community and who are on staff at NID, who are the engineers and the hydrologists and those folks, that, you know, the watershed people that really know the science. But to answer your question, I have heard about many alternatives to the dam. Now, let me just back up 1 second and say I am neither opposed nor am I for the dam. And I think that any candidate or anybody going on this board wouldn't be fully responsible to take a hard and fast position one way or the other, actually, because that dam may be appropriate. I don't know. I'm not a water person. What I know is that there's all kinds of evidence, science-backed evidence, that if we can keep our water higher, longer in the watershed, that too is a form of storage. That we need to keep connections between our groundwater and our surface water, because you know the surface water feeds the groundwater and so on. And there is a lot of storage potential in that. The problem with NID that I have seen so far is they haven't made the argument about the need. They talk about climate change, which is valid, but they haven't said, and so therefore we need X. The amount of water that they have said they need is 110,000 acre feet, and that's what the capacity of Centennial Dam is proposed to be. But within that, I think there's somewhere between 30 and 40,000 acre feet that would be called dead storage. It has to be there no matter what, right? So you start subtracting that. Then there's a certain loss to evaporation, and then there's, so you start doing the math and you go, wow, it's really not as big of water storage, usable water storage, because it won't fill up to 110,000 acre feet every year. And we're not certain about what the downstream impacts are on Camp Far West down in the Lincoln area. So essentially, we have to wait and see what the science says and what the EIR says and what the hydrologists say and what all the really water smart people have to say about it, and see if it is in fact an appropriate thing for NID to do. Now, as a business person, I think one of my biggest issues with the dam is how much it costs and who's going to pay for it. And so far, NID has not been able to say how much it's going to cost or who's going to pay for it. Now, at the forum last night, one of the candidates running was very clear and said everybody in this district is going to pay for that dam. Well, I've done the math, and others have, and that burdens each and every person about $43,000 a person.
For something we may or may not need.
So I think NID must show the need. And if there is, in fact, the need, then they must convince the community why this is important and why burdening everybody with $40,000 roughly is the right thing to do. It may be, it may not, and I don't know at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the suspicious things is that NID was founded in 1921.
Right.
And right at that time, somebody started proposing a dam on exactly that site. And
Yeah.
I think if you have an engineering mentality, I think it may be so attractive. It's been described as one of the best natural dam sites in the state. And I could see people who want to build dams just, let's do it because that's the best place.
Well, engineers love building dams, And there is a woman running in the Division 4, her name is Laura Peters, and she's a water engineer, and she said the other night, I'm an engineer and I like dams. Dams have a really important function.
Right.
This one may or may not be in the appropriate place at the appropriate time, and that is yet to be determined. So that's kind of where I stand on it.
Okay. Now, other things have happened with NID that are perhaps more positive. NID has taken over a lot of the electrical generating capacity that it used to share with PG&E, and apparently that is helping to keep down the cost of the water.
That's true.
And what is going in that direction? What are some other, let's say, progressive proposals that have come out in the last few years?
Well, the general manager has a very creative proposal to do what's called a CCA, or Community Aggregated Power. I'm not certain what the acronym stands for exactly, but it's essentially our own small utility district of power generation, where we would use our hydropower and then buy power off the grid, and we would have the ability to kind of have our own destiny, if you will, in terms of what kind of power this community wants. There are many models and many successful CCAs throughout California. I think there's 18 operating currently, where someone can say, I want all green power, and that's what they receive, and they pay an appropriate rate for it. Or I'll have a mix of hydro and nuclear, whatever, and they pay a different rate for that. But the exciting thing is that NID owns its own hydroelectric facilities, and currently they're under contract to PG&E for some period of time. There's a few that aren't, but most of the power generated is still under contract. But I love that the general manager is looking forward and seeing some interesting alternatives to do, and some great, progressive-looking projects that we can all consider for the future.
Now, I've always been a little confused about which of those projects in the high country actually were PG&E and which were NID and which were shared. The ones that NID took over recently, did NID originally build them, or was it a joint project? Or?
Well, I don't know the history of each and every one yet. What I can tell you is NID is in the process, and it may even be completed as we are taping this, of purchasing the Drum Powerhouse and the Drum Spalding canal and powerhouse from PG&E. PG&E wants to get out of the power generating business, and so they are selling off those assets. So NID had this really good opportunity to purchase those from PG&E for a very competitive price, virtually next to nothing. Sadly, on the flip side of that is these are very old, aging facilities and will need an enormous amount of maintenance and repair in order to keep them up and running. But you know, we have the opportunity to buy them, and we are, and it's very exciting.
Yeah, the Drum project was one of PG&E's landmark
Yes, it was.
projects from 100 years ago.
Yes, it was.
And I was about to ask you, why would PG&E want to give up things that were not only historically important, but also are very green sources of energy? I would have thought that right now PG&E would be jumping on creating energy in the most renewable way they can. But you just answered that a minute ago. You said they're trying to get out
They're
of
trying to get out of the generation business, the power generation business, but they will still own and operate and charge for the transmission lines. And the legislature passed, I think, a couple of years ago, this CCA Act, this Community Consolidated Power Act. And what I hear is that most of the communities in California will be their own power provider. PG&E will continue the transmission lines. So I can't answer why PG&E is getting out of the generation. I don't really know. My guess is it's just the cost of maintenance and repair. These are all aging facilities that require a lot.
Now, I know just a couple of years ago, PG&E was actually fighting local municipal power districts, even though things like EBMUD and SMUD have proven to be, I think, this has always been my understanding, more efficient and better run than the profit-making utilities.
That's been my understanding.
Yeah, I know in the Enron days, it was the private companies that all got really badly hit, and the municipal districts all sailed through it quite well.
Right, right. And you know, in my experience in buying and selling real estate in Texas, Texas has, I don't even know how many, I couldn't even count how many of these little municipal electric utilities. And what's very interesting there is they compete for your business. So I would go and I would buy 1 million square feet of a certain kind of building, and then we would put out RFPs to 3 or 4 of these power companies and say, okay, we'll buy our power from the most competitive proposal. And so we were able to buy power at really cheap rates. And you know, whether that happens in California, I don't know, but it feels like that's kind of where it's going.
And it is a total sea change from
yes, it is.
opposing municipal districts to now encouraging them, and I find it wonderful.
I know, me too. I think it's a wonderful thing. It's very exciting.
Okay, what other wonders can we foresee?
What other wonders can you foresee? I don't know about wonders. I mean, you know, NID is, they have virtually 100-year-old facilities that need an enormous amount of work, upkeep. They have 450 miles of open canals.
Right.
They have 300 miles of piping. All of that requires extraordinary maintenance and repair all the time, full time. So as a potential director, I'm going to really be looking at the budget because I want to be able to see that we can take care of our infrastructure and make sure it runs as smoothly, efficiently as possible. Then we want to be able to bring in, A, because it's the right thing to do, B, the state is going to make us, some kind of conservation, some innovative conservation measures to both the urban customers, which only account for 10% of NID's customers, and the agricultural customers, which accounts for the other 90%. So we're going to see some mandates from the state of California requiring a lot of conservation in both those two sectors. So is that exciting? Well, I don't know. You know, I think it's a challenge for NID because if people conserve, they're not buying water, then their income goes down, right?
Right.
So, you know, there's some adjustments that need to be made and some creativity that needs to be infused and some innovation around how we can meet these challenges that are coming up. And I'm an optimist. I think there's lots of room for innovation and good things to happen.
I know that ever since I moved to Nevada County almost 50 years ago, I've loved walking along NID ditches.
Me too.
And I think they're one of the wonders, to use that word again, of living in Nevada County. But I know if I were on the PG&E board, I would want to cover them up because they lose so much in leakage and evaporation.
Well, that's an interesting, there are arguments on both sides, and I think there may well be parts of those canals that do need to be encased. I think that the open canals provide much more than just a nice place for people to walk and walk their dogs. They also, through the seepage, are recharging the groundwater. They are recharging people's wells. They are providing habitat. And they actually function to some degree as a fire break. So there's a lot of reasons for leaving them open, and there's some good reasons for encasing them. And I think it's just, there's not one size fits all. I think, there are some very appropriate places where encasing those canals is a good thing to do. And I think there's some where it isn't a good thing to do. And again, it's not one size fits all. We just have to look at it.
So you're starting out with a 4-year term?
Yes, I am.
And it looks like it will be very challenging.
I think it will be challenging.
Probably very exciting.
Well, I think so. I don't know if you can tell by my manner, but I'm excited to do it. I'm excited to do it. I'm excited to get to work. I'm excited to dig in and learn more. I've learned a lot, but oh my goodness, there's so much more to learn. Even Nancy says after 20 years, she says there's still more that she needs to learn. So it is a complicated system. The laws that are changing at the state level and how the state is looking to come for our water and water for the Delta, there's lots of challenges ahead. And I happen to believe that we want to keep as much of our water here as we can. We are the source. We are the folks who get the beneficial use from it. And we can share, but we need to keep as much of our water here for us as we can.
This has been Where Do We Go From Here? I'm Eric Tome. I've been talking with Ricki Heck, who is the unopposed candidate for the first division, I keep getting that wrong, is the Nevada Irrigation District Board of Directors. She'll be taking office in
December.
Do you have any final thoughts?
I think just that I would encourage those who are watching to think about where your water comes from, engage in the process. NID has a website that continues to be upgraded and improved. Come to the meetings, inform yourself, inform your neighbors, and take part. There's nothing more important than your water. So I hope and invite you to engage in the process. Thanks.
Thank you, Ricki.
Thank you.
This has been Where Do We Go From Here? I'm Eric Tome. This program and other programs in this series can be found at the Nevada County Digital Media Center website. The program also airs and is streamed on the government channel 17 and on the YouTube NCTV channel. We'll be back.